Okay, today let's talk about this black dwarves, black elves situation that showed up in a recent adaptation on supposedly Tolkien's works, which we're all familiar with. Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the stories like that. Only in this modern form, they tried to take kinda some of the characters and pieces from it and then develop a story that isn't really related to anything Tolkien ever talked about, pretty much. And it's not just that they put black people where they never were and tried to pander and do things like the current Peter Pander movie he shows. Where also, other than dwarves of Caucasian mythology, they talk about fairies. I don't know if you're aware or not, but fairies is based on these fair-haired, fair-skinned, fair-eyed people of a long time ago, and I showed in some of my recent videos where dwarves, elves, and things like that originally came from, and how they changed it into a mythology, interjecting themselves, all Caucasians at this point, of course. But whenever we try to reimagine it, some people have taken to pandering so bad they feel like, well, we've got to change mythology even, because it doesn't represent some people that really it wasn't ever a representation of in the first place. So why would you feel that you needed or had to do this type of thing? It's actually crazy, and in a modern world, we've actually taken this little generations we're currently experiencing, where everybody tries to put Generation X on it, and have relabeled it all, going through this, the Age of Pandering. Like Peter Pander. And I don't know if you're quite sick of it yet, but people were right off the bat, especially whenever they tried to take characters like this, or Anne Boleyn, or Achilles, or perhaps Hannibal Barca might have been, and started throwing this type of rhetoric at you whenever it's all well known and established. And they didn't like that. They want to reimagine it. Reimagining actually means just shove things in there that was never in there to take a modern narrative at it. Well, it wasn't based on a modern narrative. This is from the Wayback Machine. This is mythology. So why try to do something like that? Well, they feel like that they have to pander somehow. And that is extremely telling. It's gotten to the point where whites now feel like they get pandering points, and somehow it would be real great if they just tried to lie to people and dissuade them and just all kinds of things, all in the interest of making a people feel better. And I get that sentiment. But what ends up happening is they start throwing a fit and claiming that they used to be these ancient people and that was them. And it never was. And you kind of knew this was going to happen, but you didn't care. In the age of pandering and supposed white guilt that really has faded, if you ever look into the history of the way it all went down, then all of a sudden you look back at school and what they taught you, and you're like, why were they constantly lying to us as kids? One would say omitting the truth is a form of lying. If you say da 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 da, all flowers and roses, ah da 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 da, and then you go, you know, I got a little older and I looked up and it's not true at all what you were trying to tell me. Why would you do such a thing? Like I wasted my childhood away listening to your crap, and then I have to get into a college level something or talk to someone who's gone way past this point and go, I know what they told you, but looky here. A lot of my channel is devoted to things like that, where they go, here's the start of the Bronze Age, and I go, nope, here's some bronze stuff before then. Oh, here's when Romans created concrete. No, really? There's concrete in Göbekli Tepe at 10,500 BC. Oh, we're going to call that travertine. Okay, here it is again, and they call it concrete at 7,600 BC. And it's just right down from there, showing you all these related people and how they're moving. Only problem is that they kept moving down there a little bit, became the people of the Holy Land, and then off into Egypt and portion of the people that started Egypt. Were any of them black? No, but that's not really for this video. But you could use the knowledge here and apply it to the same type of thing. I don't know if you can tell right here, but she's wearing a hair hat that is not representative of the person that's in the hair hat. In fact, if you just look at what would be her part line, they're going straight up her forehead and up into it, which has been kind of blacked out with these little gold flecks and stuff in her hair. What you would see is that, well, she doesn't have a big bump on the top of her head like that. She's not a cone head or anything weird like that. No, it's just a hair hat sitting on top of her hair. And it's Caucasian hair. But for some reason, they tried to ruffle it a little bit. Well, dwarves, if you've ever looked into it, are always having these big braids and so on like that in their hair. But of course, you've probably been witness to the idea that blacks want to tell people they invented braids somehow, whenever we know it's actually about coiling rope and people that had rope. So that leaves you as, no, not necessarily. You can look at old slaver pictures that are actually hand-drawn before any art even happened whatsoever, and you won't find them with these fine braids that they keep trying to claim. There's even been famous videos where it shows black girls trying to check up a white guy because he's got braids or he's got dreads or he's got this, and try to claim things. In fact, what this type of behavior does is it just enhances the whole fact of blacks trying to claim things that they didn't know that even existed and try to put themselves into things. And you'd think, well, they couldn't be that gullible, but in fact they are. And yes, on top of that, they don't want their own history. It's why you keep hearing them claim that we was Egyptians, we were in the Bible, we was the Vikings, we was this, we was that. And they were saying that they were the Vikings well before the Viking show came out and took a prominent man of the Viking saga and said, well, now you're a black woman. Just common sense science would say, well, her child would have been a mulatto, and then a couple more generations with, of course, no other black people around. How are you going to interject that? And how did possibly a white person pop out? It just doesn't make any sense, but it's pandering. So it ruins itself in itself, but then blacks are supposed to be happy about this. And if we do this enough, maybe all that jealousy will go away. Stupid, you're throwing fuel on the fire and saying that maybe it'll put it out. You're actually turning around and desperately shoving it in their face. And of course, they're so gullible, they want to believe. Next thing you know, they tell you that they were the elves, they were the dwarves, and so on too. You see that her hair is Caucasian here, but then also intermingled with it is stripes that have been woven into it that are red hair. I don't know if you're aware of it. They used to show this a whole lot on like National Geographic and so on, and people that are still primitives and things around the world, but they quit showing that a few years back because it was too self-exposing and it doesn't go with the narrative we're starting to push and put lies through. If you look at all this as who it's connected to, it ends up getting quite disgusting, but we don't want to go there because they're also fighting for the most oppressed people in history, supposedly. Let's continue here. You can also look at her and tell that she doesn't have brown eyes, she's got golden eyes, and I don't know if you're able to tell real easy in this picture, but those are contacts. Well, blacks actually can get this effect. They can even get blue eyes. Both of them are a weird genetic mutation that's a problem with the iris of the eye, and so it reflects light weird and different. It's 16 times more rare than them being an albino. So nothing they could go, oh, we're all this, because it's so rare It's 16 times more rare than being albino. But yet, only 1 out of 11, I think that's the number there, 11%, ends up not being a brown golden eye, which is usually what it fries out into, and so it doesn't look so brown. It's got golden eyes, and they look pretty cool. And I've even seen black people with contacts that do so. But 11 times more rare than that would then have a blue eye. And whenever you show blue-eyed Egyptians, they try to show you something like that. And then you simply can say, well, common sense science. Do you think they all had a genetic mutation and this, that, and the other? And, oh, they'll go with anything. And then you go, so how does this pale women work out where they're so pale? Oh, the Egyptians weren't pale. You know, people have tried to say stupid things, but the Egyptians themselves show you that they're blue-eyed people, a lot with blonde hair and everything. And we are so gracious that they actually made all these mummies. A lot of them have already been digged and pilfered through and around different places, but there are many blonde-haired and red-haired mummies. And now we've done genetic studies to them, and they say that the current population doesn't quite match anymore because of late post-Roman sub-Saharan admix that wasn't there before, and that the current Europeans and Anatolians have the closest match, and ancient Anatolians, not the Turkish people necessarily, so they make that distinction there. Ancient Anatolians and current modern Europeans. In fact, it was famously put out whenever they got King Tut's DNA that he's related to more than half the people in Western Europe and about 70% of the people around England and so. And boy, that just threw a fit. And you thought, well, now that DNA stepped up to the plate, same thing that'll make you go or get out of prison, all those things that's looked at, it's something that can't be debated at all. Maybe after that came out, this would stop. But no, they tried to double down. And then they tried to pretend they couldn't hear that. They weren't aware. And they've still got these bunch of lies they're coming out with. But that's about Egypt. We're talking about we was dwarves somehow. And you can blame it on the Caucasians that put her in this role here to try to pander. Or you could put it in her on the fact like, no, I can't do this. Of course, you know, if they tell you you're going to make so much on a Netflix show and everything, and you're not a known actress, you may try to go for it because you can get known. Even bad publicity sometimes is good publicity somehow, which is strange also. But you could see how blacks would easily be gullible enough to go into this. And if you just told them that some of the people that used to live up in Europe used to not have such pale skin, they were kind of olive skinned, and they're like, oh, so us. And it's like, no, olive skin means somebody like Cleopatra. Or really it, you know, and that's only a possibility. When you look at the Greeks and their coming things, when you say that, you're just talking about her tan. And you'd probably get one. Just like if I lived up in New York and I went down and lived in Florida for a while, bet I'd come back with a bigger tan. It's like a lot of times when somebody takes a vacation, they come back with a tan. It's a thing nowadays, but back in these days, having even a tan was something that showed that you were kind of a worker and had to stay out in the sun. So there are all kinds of discrepancies about that. The Greeks talked about a lot of people, and they said that they had a Greek word for darker skin, and of course blacks have hounded on that. Oh, well, they're talking about us, and it's like no one in here whatsoever is talking about you, but they're talking about a people that have a darker skin color than a sheet of paper, and somehow you keep trying to interject yourself. If you look at the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey, there are a bunch of places in there people are called Ethiopians, and it's not even in Africa, most of which are all over the place. But if you look at it closely, it's at the end of river valleys in every situation. And we're talking about redneck farmers and these people that were farmers. Now that's pagans, and that's looked at as bad by these city dwellers that are so advanced versus those country bumpkin farmers. And so that's what it really is. A couple of years ago, there was even a woman that came out and she ended up writing a book about it and about how that didn't inflect any of them. None of that is really about black people whatsoever in the thing. And what's hilarious is it was written by a black woman. trying to help out black people and let them know that please quit lying. We look like a clown on the world stage. And they just double down, and then they ignore her. She's somehow an Uncle Tom or something, and it really meant us. Far West Sub-Saharans keep doing this over and over again and saying we and pointing at everybody, and it's actually a no on every single attempt. And just to let you know, in future attempts, no, that's not true either. We don't even know what you're going to say, but unless you talk about yourself and say we and turn your finger back at yourself instead of other people you didn't know existed and aren't related to, we're not going to agree with any of it. But of course, they don't want to show any of these things because a woman running around with her titties hanging out, flopping in a loincloth at best is not going to go over good, especially with all the lies they've tried to expose. And in their jealousy, they're saying, well, we weren't like that. We were advanced, da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, we looked into all of archaeology and everything, and nope, not necessarily. So let's look at real history and dwarves type of people and see how that goes over. I guess the one that we could do that has something to do with sub-Saharans and things like that are the Pygmies. They're a diminutive people too. Of course, they never did any mining and whistle while they work and all the stuff that goes along with dwarves, so it's not who we're talking about. But given a chance that, well, they have their own dwarves and they really existed. They're still existing today. What goes on with those? Let's just take a quick look. So if you simply go to Wikipedia, you'll see a article on pygmies. Just type in pygmies and it'll end up having this. Let's see if I can just twist this over here. Or we can have you read a little bit along with me. Now I'm not going to read this whole thing. That would be terrible. Used to be in the first 2 paragraphs, they already said what I'm going to say, but oh, that got changed. Well, is it gone? No, it's said a little differently now and way down here farther if you read that far somehow. So, Pygmy peoples are ethnic groups whose average height is unusually short. So it's like a dwarf, right? Now in Caucasian dwarves, they were always looked at as something special, something magical. You can see that in ancient Egypt and everywhere, even all the way up to court jesters and things like that. They're used. So they always gave them a place in society. In fact, the earliest known variation of this is in the ancient Sumerians, whenever they're supposedly creating the people of the earth. And along with Ninti and Enki, they ended up making people that had problems like a little clay statue and handing it to the other person, and the other person was told what the affliction was, and they were supposed to try to figure out how they could still make that person usable in society. And it went on 6 or 8 times. It's fantastic. And then finally Enki took somebody and screwed them all up, and they can't even pee and this, that, and the other, and they're deflicted. There's an extreme problem with it. And then she throws a fit about it. Strangely, I've shown in other videos of how this goes along with the Bible and the idea that Ninti means lady of the rib. And so you wonder how in this mythology of the Bible they come up with an idea that a woman grew from a rib and ate from a magic tree because a talking snake or a dragon perhaps told her to. Because that was a walking, talking wise serpent. And then God cursed it to be walking on it today. People have also tried to claim it's Satan and all kinds of things like, oh, so he let him just walk around nilly-willy in the garden and God's unaware and it. No, it all falls apart. Let's just stop it with that. But let's go back to this. So Pygmy peoples, they're an ethnic group. They have a phenotype of endemic short stature as opposed to disproportionate dwarfism occurring in isolated cases in populations. So it's a little different than that. But these people are just extremely small. And of course there's negritos and other people that are somewhat of this short stature, and we found them through time, just like we found giants, and people don't realize it, but whenever you compare a 5-foot tall person to somebody that's well over 6 foot, that looks like a giant. If you don't think so, go stand up Dirk Nowitzki or any basketball player as you being a normal height, and you were like, damn, this guy's like a giant. Well, he's not near as tall as some of them they said, but see, if they're those people, they have to say it was bigger than, and I went into giants a long time ago, but this is exactly opposite. What we're looking at is a people that look like this. And you can see this normal white man might be 6 foot. He's not no 8 foot tall basketball player or anything silly. But these other people here are just a 4 foot, 4.5. And the one on the right is actually a female of the species. There's really little sexual dimorphism between the two unless you see boobies or things like that. So this is the people that we're talking about of this size. And so how did that work out? And how did they treat dwarves and all of those things? Well, they're in Africa, they're in Central Africa, and there's a distribution that's here that used to be more around this area down here, but they've got changed, enslaved, and pulled up here, spread out because of things, and they're actually even spread out all the way to the very top of Lake Tanganyika here, before Lake Victoria here, and Lake Malawi would be just out of the screen here, and that's part of where the Nile comes from. But anyhow, these people here that are different types, they're basically all within parameters, the same people. And it'll talk to you about it. But let's just see, let's go to one little part here that shows violence against pygmies. I'll try to read it straightforward. This is coming from the straight article. This is wiki. This is intelligent people who spent their life figuring it all out. Their names are all written at the bottom. I know you hear nowadays that, oh, wiki can't be trusted and this, that, and the other. I think the people all downstairs can be trusted. There was one little point there that somebody could try to write anything and it'll get put in, but then somebody needs a citation and it gets thrown back out. And there was a hilarious group of those that came on. But that's been, what, 6-8 years ago now, and fixed since then. But it, it still lingers, that idea with don't trust that. It's almost like don't trust an encyclopedia, because this is really a online encyclopedia. Sure, some people tried to infiltrate it, lie and make up stuff, or twist the way things really were, but most of that, let's just say, has been fixed. And this is truthful. So let's read what they say here. Reported genocides. Talking about Rwandan genocide in Effacer de Tableau. The Pygmy population was the target of the Interahamwe during the 1994, very recently here, Rwandan genocide of the 30,000 Pygmies that were around in Rwanda at the time. An estimated 10,000 were killed and another 10,000 were displaced out of the area, as I showed you on the map, and they've been described as forgotten victims of the genocide. Believe it or not, I've heard a lot about the genocide, and rarely do you even hear them mentioned. It's supposed to be like these two people here, so where does this come in at? Well, terribly, from the end of 2002 through January 2003, around 60,000 Pygmy civilians and 10,000 combatants were killed and often cannibalized in an extermination campaign known as Effacer de Tableau during the Second Congo War. Human rights activists have made demands for the massacre to be recognized as a genocide and for what it is, but due to the current narratives, we can't say that, because who were the people doing this? This is the Bantu people. These are the people that are spread out due to the slave trade and are now trying to currently claim we was Egyptians, we was in Bible, we was everybody but ourselves. But how did they treat their possible dwarves? That's strange, given the other narrative. If they're around white people, they'd be acting like this. I mean, what are we supposed to glean from this showing here that's just trying to interject somebody into something, and whether it's a mythology or something true, like the current documentary on Cleopatra, which tries to put another Bantu West Sub-Saharan into that? Are they disrespecting the Nilotics that could have been darker skinned in there? No, they of course weren't related to anybody that had anything to do with it. The Egyptians were always Caucasians, and Cleopatra is a Macedonian Greek. She's shown in a lot of depictions with red or auburn hair and so on, and they have her phenotype and everything. It fits with everything. But then the blacks that came out with this, of course, have to do with Will Smith's wife. Or is she a wife? anyhow, and it claims it might be ambiguous. We're not totally sure, so it's entirely possible that a West African Bantu had come and turned herself into it, and that the Macedonian Greeks didn't recognize it. Just wow, huh? Whenever it's all Caucasians, most of them blue-eyed around here, and a lot of them with lighter hair and everything, all of a sudden, what's this that happens? It's past disgusting. Let's read on though. Forced removal and a strategy referred to as fortress conservation in national parks. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, such as Kuche being a national park, Masak Ja projected the area of Republic of Congo, and Cameroon's Lobeke National Park. Heavily armed park rangers came into deadly conflict with the Pygmy inhabitants who often cut the trees down to sell charcoal. That's kind of like the black primitives that are still living in Haiti to this day, and how they've actually turned all the trees on the island, which used to be a lush tropical island, into charcoal. And in doing so, now they have all these mudslides and everything, and they can't help themselves, and whitey people have to go and help and spend millions of dollars trying to get them back to going. It's always a one-sided effort too, and in fact, after the effort goes on, do they turn around and go, okay, let me do something for you, what you got going on? Never happens. Nah, but we'll just let that slide. The conservation efforts of national parks in the country are often financed by international organizations such as World Wildlife Fund and Whitey Cracker Magic, and often involving native inhabitants off the land. Some have argued that the most efficient conservation methods involve giving land rights to the land's indigenous inhabitants. Well, that would be great, but the Pygmies are indigenous, and you've done pushed them out of their areas and cannibalized them and all kinds of things. Oh, but they don't want to even believe that this happened. It's well documented, though. Here it is straightforward in a wiki article, which has been changed, and I feel like in the future it might be changed, or it might turn to be ambiguous and act like, well, we were sure before, but now we're going to pander and say, I don't know. So you might want to lock onto this. I've shown few articles that just said something straight out, and then all of a sudden it got ambiguous about the same thing before, and then I have to go through a few hoops. Reported slavery in the area. In the Republic of Congo, where Pygmies make up 2% of the population, many Pygmies live as slaves to Bantu masters. Are you reading this? The nation is deeply stratified between these two major ethnic groups. The Pygmy slaves belong to their Bantu masters from birth in a relationship that the Bantus call a time-honored tradition. Yes, most people don't know it, but slavery still goes on in Africa. In fact, there are more slaves now that black have in Africa than were ever in the Americas at any time. But they don't care about that, and they really want it to go away so they can keep their narrative going on. Which just recently in the movie about the Dahomey tribe and how there was a woman king got really thrown in their face. And I'm quite certain that a lot of black people that learned about this then did not know that they were actually a slaver and a major problem in that whole situation. And they used to do human sacrifices and all this stuff going on. And that's not what's shown in the movie, is it though? And that pissed people off because they're like, you're not trying to rewrite history and say something stupid that's not the truth, are you? And yep, and they got caught at it. So the Pygmy slaves belonged to their Bantu masters from birth. In a 2007 news report, so just here recently, people have stated that even though Pygmies are responsible for much of the hunting, fishing, manual labor in the jungle villages, Pygmies and Bantus alike say that, so they both say that, Pygmies are often paid at the master's whim, whatever, in cigarettes, used clothing, or even nothing at all. As a result of pressure from UNICEF and human rights activists, in 2009, a lawsuit would grant that special protections to the Pygmy people was awaiting a vote by the Congo Parliament. According to reports made in 2013, this law was never passed. Oh no, there are black people being oppressed. Well, we've got to stop that. Who's oppressing them? Well, they're eating them too. It's the Bantu people, the ones that are claiming we was. It's the Bantu people that aren't related to anybody, including the Pygmies or Khoisan or Nilotics or East Africans. They didn't even know they existed, really, and they're not really related. I know you think that just because they're darker skinned than a piece of paper that they're all related somehow, but it's not true. And each one has a separate admix that also shows you something quite different. In fact, we're going to go one layer thicker in that onion, if you don't mind, and quit talking about this or the ethnic conflicts and discrimination and things that are coming up here on the story. Discrimination, Bantu tribes, Pygmy children were, oh man. Y'all can just go to the page here, Wiki Pygmies, and go to it. We're going to take a look at something else here so I can explain who were where, were what, were when a little bit. And this is the way they still live in the non-colonized parts in all of Africa, where it's really like a dung hut or something very similar and primitive like this. But if you look, she has more modern baskets and so on, and cloth and things like that. Whenever the first reports were, they were lucky if they had a loincloth on. And we're going to look at Asalarman. If you've been with my site for a while, you've probably seen this a few times. I feel like I have to keep mentioning it because whenever they make claims like we were this or we were that, we were whatever, and you go, okay, here's something that makes that not in effect. So if you would just learn the truth, then we wouldn't be hearing all these lies, but we keep hearing all these lies. Looks like this has been changed a little bit, but let's go ahead and go with it. The Asalar specimen has been dated to 6400 BP. They put BP on there to exaggerate the date. That's before present, so it's 4400 BC. We're over 2000 AD. So take 2000 off of that. 4,400 years before present, making it no older than the Holocene. Well, of course not. The Holocene was the end of the last ice age, and that happened over 10,500 years ago. Got lots of videos about what was going on during that time. But along with such fossils as Iru Elu, which is 11,000 years before present, or 9,000 BC. Hold on a minute. They really went to depth of it, and they dated it to 9,100. So they've added 100 years to that. And a Shango, which is 8,000 years BP, which were excavated by archaeological sites in West Central Africa. Asalarman is one of the earliest known anatomical modern human skeletons with Negroid phenotype. The people that living in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, way before any of this happened. 4,400 BC is him. Now, when they mention Iwo Eliru, that's something very telling because they try to say it's all the same. Well, they're part of that Negroid phenotype, but what are they talking about Iwo Eliru? Because if they say 4,400 BC is the modern form, what are we talking about with Iwo Eliru? Well, Iwo Eliru, who is from that same area as shown right there on the map, is actually a football-headed, small-brained, still extant hominid. This is like a Homo erectus form that still exists. I know you were taught in school that everything was kind of linear and Homo erectus gave rise to all these other things. That's when they were talking about the supposed projection on Caucasian men, because some people had never turned from anything but a Homo erectus form until an admix that happened apparently at 4,400 BC and gives Asalarman the oldest larger brain species. So at that point it was a hybrid of some people that were endemic North Africans that had E1b genetics, and E and all of its subclads are derived from Eurasian CT. And all this is well known, although there's some ambiguity if it happened right inside of Africa or out before it went and all these things. But one thing is sure, they tell you right there that it has nothing to do with West Sub-Saharans until Oopsie, and now all of a sudden they aren't football-headed, small-brained, 4.5-foot tall people, but they all of a sudden have their modern phenotype. It shows you where it comes from, but At this point, Egypt is already getting ready to get going. There are sites known there for farming and stuff over 7,000 BC. So when I say we was, they're not talking about anybody they are related to or themselves. It's really quite telling. And they want to act like, and they probably will, once it all gets found out like this, that, oh, somebody's making something up. And they go, yes, your lies. You've been making them up and everybody's been watching and you've become the joke of humanity on the world stage. And we've tried to get you to quit and you keep trying to say, that's whitey cracker magic and that's not da-da-da-da. And I'm not going to believe in science or anything. And that separates yourself. And now you're just getting known to be someone who can't be trusted and a liar and all these other things. And you're putting it on yourself in the middle when we're trying desperately to prop you up. So desperate to prop you up. And then it's just like flopping like a rag doll. And all these lies have been coming out. And it gets worse. And whenever you do this pandering thing, they go, see, we was right. And it's like, A, that's a modern movie. And it's pandering and it's, you want to desperately believe something that you'll never be able to prove, and all archaeology shows another thing. It's not going to be debatable, but they think that it is. And it's not whatsoever debatable. It never was. So it's kind of odd that you would want to debate something like that. But this isn't named for a people, it's just the sites where Iwo Liru is where they found this one at, just like an area known as Aslar where they find it out. So this is somebody who has connected to those people. And there's no modern humans to any of it. Believe me, they've tried desperately to find some, and this is all they really find, and then it peters out. Whereas modern Homo sapiens has been found in North Africa dating back to 315 to 325,000 years. And a totally modern human went out of Africa, Cro-Magnon and all those things that go to it show you there's a radical difference in an age of pandering when we're trying to say, oh, they're all the same. It's like, well, there's quite a difference. One thing that also shows that this is true is they recently decided to let go the information that blacks have up to 19%, only these West Africans, have up to 19% unknown ghost hominid, i.e. nobody else on the planet has this, and so it's exclusive to them, just like, Neanderthal DNA and so on, or Denisovans for the people that are in the Far East and stuff like that have in their genetics, just like Oriental people themselves have a mix there that gives them the eye fold that makes their eye look different than most all the people that are over here and so on. But there's a wild difference between those two in comparing something like blue-eyed Caucasians or Caucasians just in general and their history, of course, and then something in West Sub-Saharan Africa. And I don't know where you're at on this, but if you look at the headhunters of Irian Jaya and say these people were not even that advanced whenever they were found, versus what they're trying to tell you, you'll realize that there's a big hill to go through for any of those lies to be in effect, but also who keeps lying to these people and getting them believing these things and allows it? Oh, it won't hurt anything, let them, oh, now they're all wound up making stupid shows. Again, that Cleopatra show is not like a fantasy belief. No, it's pushed as being a documentary. It's hilarious. Will Smith's wife there, it caused him to get slapped, all that went on during the Oscars and stuff and everything. But the one that sleeps with her own son's friends, that one, the one that was in a interview wearing a blonde, mimicking hair that she had spent thousands on getting done as it receded and fell out pretty much from all the treatments. Now she claims alopecia, which is real questionable. But she was sitting there with blonde hair, and she said, oh, you know what gets me? What really makes me mad is blonde white women. And it's like, you're trying to mimic one right now. Oh my gosh, it's just so self-exposing. But they don't see any of this. They feel like they're entitled to say things like this. Oh, just group everybody together. White people this, white people that. And you go, okay, so we're going to take that same thing and we're just going to put black people in there and see if you freak out on it. Da 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 da. Black people. Da da da. Oh, hold on a minute. I'm not even through saying black people like you just did in your words right there. But you seem to think that it's fantastically okay, and asked, are you entitled to do it somehow? And have you heard? They pretend that they can't be racist because of their position in society, and it's like, that has nothing to do with it. So anyhow, so we saw Iwo, we saw that, and so you can probably now kind of tell the way that it happened, but also this mystery maybe that you can look into where they try to claim they were in Egypt, they were in that, and you're like, well, how could you get any of that from you? Well, hilariously, sadly, it seems like what they want to do is they want to say, well, some black people somewhere did something, therefore we can claim it. And it's like, well, you're not related to the people that did, so why would you try so hard? Most people realize that it's jealousy.
A daily nutritional solution that lays the foundation.
So I guess we can see the reality of the situation and perhaps the answer to it, but it's the same answer if we try to claim we was in Bible, we was this, we was that, we was anywhere but, or so on. In the age of pandering, you get this type of situation, but that really shouldn't be in effect. Hopefully one day soon somebody starts realizing that this type of behavior and activity is not to be condoned in any way, and you sure don't want to make these gullible people try to start believing silly things. It's not just the dwarves here, but it's the elves, and it's Hannibal Barca, and it's the Queen Anne Boleyn of England, and it's Charlotte, and it's we was Beethoven, and we was Shakespeare. And you think I'm lying to you, look it up. We were the Greeks. There are black people in this new Hebrew Israelites who are sitting around on street corners yelling at white people that they were the people of the Bible. It wasn't Whitey that brought white Jesus to us. And then they blaspheme on the Bible while yelling and try to pretend that they've done something. And they really feel like they did. And they puff all up. And if you try to talk to them, they just start yelling and talking over you and go, up, can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, till you walk off. Or they act like they're fixing to get in a fight with you or anything else that they can do to try to keep their little lie alive. It's terrible when you watch it. But, you know, not too much was said about this, but I think we all noticed that whenever it happened, that didn't get so much play. And they're like, oh, we should have made billions off this, so what happened? Well, you screwed it all up. Given the opportunity, just like Star Wars and so on like that, you took it and made it into something that it never was, and you screwed it all up. And it wasn't just this, it was bad writing and other kinds of things, but then bad writing, and I pander, and I da-da-da-da-da, and there's black elves too, and da-da-da. Well, how did that happen? You know, the elves were known for fair hair. When they showed something like Legolas, that's quite accurate. Whenever they say that it had something to do with the old Levant and stuff that was there, and then you find out the Seder people are always drawn with these goat ears on because they were famous goat farmers by other people and so on, and then you go, that has to do with the elves. And then Genetic steps up the plates and goes, you are correct. Got videos about it. Got videos about fairies and so on like that too, and that was well before I heard that they were going to make Peter pander, or they were going to do this, or do anything else. So it's kind of hilariously sad that it's like, well, here's the reality of that situation, and then they go, oh, and there was a black one in here somehow. Well, he looks black, but he's got different eye contacts in, and here you go again. But then if it bred with these other people around it, then it would lose its phenotype and everything real quick and disappear. Is that what you want to try to believe? Oh, there was some black person somewhere mixed in somehow. How did it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But for gullible people, it'll work enough because they don't want to turn around and look into it. I don't know how sick this makes some black people when they see the current pandering going on. But to most everybody else watching, they're like, oh, can you stop? And they say, no, here comes a new one. And we already spent $20 million on another one. And there's one in the works. Given the opportunity for Will Smith's wife to show things about black queens, the first one she shows is a kick in the face. The Dahomey tribe movie came out about woman queens, and oh, they got in trouble for all the lies they did about that because they're a slaver of people, and the narrative is exactly backwards of what you're trying to push and everything. It's terrible. But then what does she do? Well, I guess she wants to clear her name because of what happened with Will and her and everything that's going on. So she tries to come out smelling like roses. Well, what's the second show about black queens going to be? Is it going to be the Benin people or any? No, it's we was black Cleopatra. Somehow Cleopatra, a Macedonian Greek, not even an Egyptian, might have somehow been a West Sub-Saharan Bantu. And it's like, wow, are you dissing the local people and everybody and everything and all of history just to try to interject yourself again? How self-exposing. Maybe you should stop doing this, but you feel like you're just getting going, and next thing we're going to do, we're going to make the Flintstones and we're going to put black people in that. And it's like, you would never want to show black people as primitives, which is the real effect of truth. So, and this is the problem of jealousy and envy. And so they feel like they're totally different, but the rest of the world is looking and seeing, well, those black people in America are screwed up and they just want to claim everything except for themselves. Yep, it's happening. It's happening all around you. And they don't want to quit. They feel like it's a good thing if you pander. Well, just between you and me, pandering is an expressive showing of white superiority because you have to pander and interject people knowingly into something that they weren't involved with. Once they find out that, they might quit. But then there's that juxtaposition between, yeah, but they're lying to us and making us feel better. Does it really make you feel better? Has anything really changed? Are you more angry about reality now? Do you feel entitled because they've set these movies out and lied to you, and now you're all strutting around like you did something that you didn't even know existed? Wait till Cleopatra comes out. It was funny whenever Black Panther came out and black people acted like it really existed, and it's like it's a comic book. Show me Wakanda. Oh, and then they get mad and they want to call you a racist, and they go, no, we're calling you out for being a racist with what you just said to me. Oh, here we go. Which one is true? Was it even made by a black person or written by a black person or anything? No. This shows you where we're at. Anyhow, I'm going to get on. I think I've said enough about black pygmies or dwarfs and what actually happened versus this push narrative that has actually taken Tolkien's legacy and tried to ruin it. Yeah. And I've heard that they might make a new one, and everybody's like, if you attempt to pander one bit, we're totally against it. Hey, I grew up studying mythology. I got into Dungeons and Dragons game because it's based on mythology and went all through it and everything else. It's hilariously sad to watch this type of thing going on. In a modern day, we turn around and we call it the Age of Pandering. Just a few days apparently coming out is Peter Pander. They're going to show that. Did you know that there's Snow White coming out? And she's not Snow White anymore. She's ethnic somehow. Did you know West Sub-Saharans were mermaids with red hair? Did you know that all of this is disgusting and yet people are wanting it to happen? Isn't that strange? Over here on the right, just pulling this thing up that I did in this one video, there are 4 videos showing how woke ideology transforms history in Netflix Cleopatra. And it says it's just outright racist. Netflix panics. Fake Cleopatra documentary sparks backlash. Da-da-da. Moving on, guys. Peace.